Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast from Wolves Warriors on Wednesday night at Golden State. This was a really fun game. The Timberwolves trailed by more than 20 multiple times, but got within 4 late in the game. Anthony Edwards dropped 48 in this one. We're talking all about Ant's performance as well as Andrew Wiggins' revenge game once again against the Timberwolves and individual studs and duds, key takeaways for the game. All that is upcoming on the show tonight. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. I'm also the co-editor of Dunking with Wolves, the Timberwolves site on the Fansided Network. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. Happy Thursday, everybody. This is the post-game podcast from Wolves Warriors on Wednesday night. First of all, thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Remember, the show is free and available on all platforms. That includes YouTube, as well as Apple, Google, Spotify, and, of course, the all-new Odyssey app. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right, so today on the show, this is the post-game pod. So we're talking all things Wolves Warriors. We're talking Anthony Edwards, 48 points, second most points that any player scored in a game so far this season individually, and a career high, of course, for him. He had, I think, 41 or 42 against Phoenix last year. Andrew Wiggins, 35 points, and yet another Andrew Wiggins revenge game. I want to hit key takeaways first. I want to hit kind of my notes from during the game, kind of as the game was going on, how it unfolded, and then kind of move that into key takeaways, what we can pull out from this one. And then we'll talk about individual performances, individual studs and duds, as we always do. So let's start with some of my notes from during the game. The first quarter, the Timberwolves, I mean, this was a close game in the first, but the Wolves made a lot of really silly mistakes. And this was a theme. First quarter, fourth quarter, I think are probably the two. The second quarter was bad for the Wolves, but it was just a bad quarter. The first and third quarters, it kind of felt like the Wolves and Warriors were playing pretty much equal with one another, believe it or not, even for chunks of the fourth quarter. Seriously. It's just there were some really dumb mistakes that were being made, which I guess is a good reason to suggest that the Warriors, or that's good evidence that the Warriors are simply a better team. We know that. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, first quarter, what was the score at the end of the first? The Wolves were only down 3 at the end of the first quarter, but Anthony Edwards missed 2 point-blank layups. Jared Vanderbilt had 5 offensive rebounds, and I believe the Timberwolves scored once. I think they got a 3 from Ant after one of his offensive rebounds and did not score following his other 4 offensive rebounds. Karl-Anthony Towns missed a wide-open 3 with nobody within 10 feet of him. There was a couple of plays in transition where they simply just didn't stop the ball. Like, nobody stopped the ball. They had 4 guys back, and everybody just kind of let the ball go to the rim. Dumb mistakes like that, yet they only trailed by 3. And that was mostly because Anthony Edwards scored 16 in the first quarter. Karl-Anthony Towns only shot 2 of 9 in the first. But it was really frustrating because the Timberwolves deserved a better fate based on how well they played offensively. And when they were actually set in the half court, they did a pretty decent job. They didn't allow too many second chance opportunities early in the game to Golden State. But it was just these kind of really dumb lapses. And we'll get more into the defensive side of the ball because that was the issue late in the game, is where all the lapses happened. Early in the game, it was mostly just really dumb mistakes on offense outside of some of the transition issues defensively that we've seen a lot of so far this year. And then as the game went on, I mean, there was some interesting lineup rotation decisions made by Chris Finch that I actually liked, but I think that contributed to some of the defensive issues, the miscommunications, etc. As we moved through the game, second quarter, the Warriors started to pull away. They actually got up by 20 in the second. Jared Vanderbilt, Josh Okogie, Malik Beasley, they were all guilty of trying to do too much offensively and make silly mistakes, silly turnovers. Just kind of a bevy of turnovers in the second quarter. Let the Warriors get out and run, get some dunks, get some wide open threes, and build a 20-plus point lead. The Wolves ate into it a little bit at the end of the first half and ended up being down 15 at the break. And then in the second half, the third quarter is when the Wolves really kind of went off. And a lot of that was D'Angelo Russell, who had just a terrible first half of the game. It was completely a tale of two halves for D'Lo. We'll talk more about him later. But Draymond Green got hurt. He got kneed, I think, by Jaden McDaniels on the thigh. They ended up saying it was a thigh contusion, which is great. It kind of looked like it could have been the side of his knee on the replay, but if it's just his thigh, I'm sure he'll be back, hopefully in the next couple of games for the Warriors for his sake. But the Warriors are up 17 when they took Draymond Green out of the game. The Wolves got within 4 at the end of the fourth quarter. And then right after that happened, there were a couple of really bad defensive miscommunications. Nemanja Bjelica, former Timberwolf, of course, hit a wide open three because D'Lo, I guess, decided to not. It was weird. I think D'Lo blew the assignment, and then he pointed at Naz to step out on Bjelica. He hits the three. The Wolves turn it over on the other end. I think the Warriors got a free throw or two the next time down, and suddenly it's back up to like a 7-point game. And as we go to the fourth quarter, it was what was it? It was 9 points again, actually, at the start of the fourth, and it had been to 4 just a little bit before that. The Wolves got a little closer. I think they got within 5 or 6 a couple of times early in the fourth, but Karl-Anthony Towns didn't come back in until after the 10-minute mark, and the Warriors pretty much kind of ran away with the game at that point. There wasn't a whole lot of intrigue in the final couple of minutes, except for how high would Ant's point total be. And I mean, I think that was a little bit detrimental to the Wolves. I want to get into that here in a minute. I'm not at all suggesting Ant didn't have a good game. He was phenomenal. But as the Wolves were kind of morphing into desperation mode, that was accelerated by some of the shots and decisions Anthony Edwards was making offensively. So I want to actually spend the next segment talking about those key takeaways from the game. So I kind of hit the quick ones, like as the game was happening, how did this unfold? But what do we take out of this? What were the defensive issues? Because there were some. What were the offensive issues? Because it's like the Wolves could never, and of course we're talking about a team now that's 3-7 on the year. So obviously, right? They could never get the offense and defense working together at the same time. In this game, it's never been more obvious, right? Early, it was, good defense, solid offense, but some dumb mistakes. As the game went on, it was a lot of offense, offense was great. And then late in the game, it was all offense, no defense at all. So I want to dig into some of those issues. I want to talk about one of the things that maybe isn't getting talked about enough that I think is really hurting the Timberwolves and the flow of their offense, especially second, third quarter, and then for stretches in the fourth. We all know that it's been well documented. The Wolves have the worst net rating of any team in the NBA in the fourth quarter, and they weren't. I mean, it wasn't any better, really. I mean, like they played a decent fourth quarter, but ultimately the Warriors pulled away when they needed to. So what I think there's a player that has been part of those rotations that we haven't spent a lot of time on this show talking about, that he needs to get some stuff figured out. The Wolves actually could probably help him with the way that they use him. So I want to get into all that here next segment. Before we do that, though, let's talk about our friends at betonline.ag. We're back and we're better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season. More props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Our promo code is Locked On. Just use the promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. From basketball to football, NHL to boxing, and UFC, right on down to your favorite Las Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021-2022 seasons. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. Again, promo code Locked On. That's our special promo code. You'll receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, let's talk key takeaways. So, let's talk about Anthony Edwards. I mentioned his 48 points. I don't want to bury. I guess I've already buried the lead a little bit. That's the headline for this game, right? Is Ant drops 48, Wiggins drops 35 against his former team. But if you watch the game, it wasn't all about that. There was the nice first quarter back and forth. There was the Ant flurry in the late third, early fourth, and then the Wiggins exclamation point with a couple of big threes and a couple of more big dunks. He had like 3 big dunks in this game. 2 were around Karl-Anthony Towns, in the vicinity of Karl-Anthony Towns. I think saying they were over Towns is maybe misrepresented it a little bit, especially the first one when Cat got out of the way. The second one, he vaulted himself over Cat on an offensive rebound, which is cool. But I mean, as Jim Peterson accurately stated on the broadcast on Bally Sports North, every player in the league basically has had a dunk like that, which is a little bit of exaggeration, but it wasn't, it wasn't exactly like Kevin Garnett put, his famous putback dunk when he was basically at the free throw line and reached behind his head and threw one down on a putback. It wasn't that. It was more of is what we've seen from Wiggs in the past in the Timberwolves uniform, honestly. At any rate, the headline is the Wiggins Edwards thing. Great. Anthony Edwards was really, really good for a couple of very specific stretches in this game, but he had some really big problems early in the first quarter. A couple, I mentioned already, a couple of missed layups. Uh, some shot selection issues in the third quarter. Actually, right before he went off, I put in my notes that Ant was basically being baited into these kind of step back threes. He was playing right into the Warriors' hands. He was more than happy to be launching, and it wasn't. The Wolves were down 20. Nothing else was working. Whatever. But it was it wasn't working at that moment. Then D'Angelo Russell actually is the one who got hot first, hit 3 threes in a span of just a couple of minutes. And then Ant all of a sudden started to click again. And he hit a couple of threes and he got into the paint. And then there was an alley-oop. It was actually to get them within 4 at the end of the third quarter. It was a D'Lo to Ant alley-oop on a fast break after a steal. Ant stole the ball from Steph Curry on a pass. And they got out in transition, which is what the Wolves need to do, honestly, to fix their offense, is get more transition opportunities, get some more confidence, get some more easy open threes. Ant hit a couple of those where in transition, he just pulled up from, 28 feet, 29 feet and hit an open three. But Ant's performance overall was really good. And I don't, this was like the epitome of outstanding Ant and the Ant that sometimes is more of a ball stopper and can hurt the offense occasionally. But he was efficient. I mean, he was 16 to 27. He shot better than 50% from the field, better than 50% from 3, 7 of 13 from deep, 9 of 12 at the free throw line, got to the free throw line a bunch. He had 6 turnovers, but I bet I would imagine 3 of them were late in the fourth quarter when the game was basically out of hand. And at that point, honestly, I think he was just saying it, and I'm not ripping on him for this. I think Ant was basically like, let's see how many I can get. Let's see if I can get to 50, because he had a couple of bad turnovers in the closing minutes when it was basically garbage time. I would say at least 2 of his 6 turnovers. Yep, for sure. 2 of 6 of his turnovers were in the final 2 minutes of the game. So I mean, generally speaking, this was an outstanding Anthony Edwards game. We've seen the bad side of Anthony Edwards for much of the season so far. Outside of the opener against the Rockets, Ant has been a lot more December, January, February Ant from last year than he was, than he's been the March, April, May version of last year, which again, I said this frequently preseason. If Anthony Edwards is the March, April, May version of himself, he is an all-star, hands down, full stop, no questions. He's an all-star. If he's the December, January, February version of Ant, the Wolves will not be a playoff team. And that, to me, if we're going to boil the first 3 weeks down to one thing, and I'm certainly not saying he is the reason that they're 3-7, because there's a multitude of reasons, as I've detailed on the show. But the bad version of Ant versus the good version of Ant, the good version of Ant is all-star. The bad version of Ant is barely rotation player. And he's vacillated between the two over the first 3 weeks of the season, and the consistency just hasn't been there. The ball stopping has been bad. The defensive effort's been uneven. But this game was enough good Ant that the Wolves were in this game. I mean, he was the reason. Him and a couple of timely shots from D'Lo in the third quarter were the reason the Wolves were in this game late. So I think his performance overall is notable in this game. Obviously, the 48 points. But he stepped up to the challenge. I mean, he saw this as, hey, I'm facing Steph Curry. I'm facing Andrew Wiggins, who's trying to go off on my buddy Karl-Anthony Towns, his former teammate. What can I do to stem the tide of this? And we know that Edwards isn't going to shrink from something like that. Another key takeaway for me is the defensive communication issues. I think the more I've thought about this over the past 2 games, so we saw a lot more Naz Reid and Karl-Anthony Towns on Monday in the loss at Memphis. We saw even more of it in this game, basically most of the second quarter, like the 9-minute to the 3-minute mark of the second quarter. Those 2 guys, Naz Reid and Karl-Anthony Towns, were on the floor together. And then we saw a lot of it late in the game. It was mostly successful. And But I do think that some of the defensive miscommunications, the low man not stepping up, happened far too often in this game, where the Warriors were just getting an easy dunk or a layup, or the ball was getting kicked to the corner because the full rotation didn't happen. There were some just really silly miscommunications in transition. I blame that partially on these new lineups playing together. I mean, Torian Prince didn't play. It was his second, I believe, DNPCD. Josh Okogie didn't play much. So we're talking about these new lineups, more Patrick Beverley and D'Angelo Russell together. They started together again in this game. More Naz and Karl-Anthony Towns together. More Vanderbilt and Jaden McDaniels even playing together, although not as much because Jaden again was in foul trouble, which has become a nightly thing, unfortunately for him. But I think these new lineup combinations, that's part of the reason. Now, it's not really an excuse because you still have to communicate and who's taking who's got ball in transition, easy stuff like that. When you are the low man, you need to know you're the low man and what your role is in guarding the pick and roll. Um, and there were problems with that in this game. I think it's partially to do with the different rotations, and I'm not blaming Chris Finch because I thought the rotation decisions were largely really good, outside of maybe not bringing Towns back sooner in the fourth quarter, when the lead was going back to double digits. But generally speaking, I love the Naz Cat minutes, and I will die on that hill. I will die on Naz and Jared Vanderbilt as the best options that the Wolves have at the four next to Karl-Anthony Towns. Those two should really be the only two playing the four next to Karl-Anthony Towns. I think that Jaden McDaniels is far better suited to play the three. At any rate, it's a topic for another episode. I talked about the tale of two halves for D'Lo. He was atrocious in the first half. I think he had 4 points at halftime, but came alive in the third quarter against his former team and was really good in the second half. Had 18 points, 7 to 15 shooting, made 4 threes on 10 attempts. Was pretty good in the second half. And then the last thing is Malik Beasley. This is probably also a topic. I could spend an entire show talking about Malik Beasley. Um, I mean, he's had two good games this year. I think it was the Nuggets game and maybe one of the Clippers games where he was actually really good. This was a brutal performance from Malik, and I'll talk a little more about him in studs and duds. Spoiler there, or maybe not. If you watch the game, you know which category Malik's in. Um, just no confidence. 0 for 3 on 3-pointers. There's still no lift on his shot. He's shooting a flat jumper. He shot, I think, 2 or 3 mid-range jumpers in this game, which Malik, I mean, I will do this on a future episode, and I'll pull his shot charts from previous years. He doesn't shoot mid-range jumpers. He's not Jalen Noel, right? He's not shooting elbow jumpers with frequency, but he has been recently. They called a couple plays to get him curling around screens with that as an option recently. I didn't notice it in the Golden State game necessarily, but the Memphis game for sure, and maybe even the last home game they played, where Beasley got some opportunities going downhill with the option to shoot at the elbow. Um, but I mean, they called at least one play to get him an open corner three, and he missed it. They're trying to get him involved a little bit. I think it's just such a challenge. I mean, he is a player who, at this stage in his career, feels like he's a starter. He was a starter last year. He signed the contract thinking he was a starter, and bringing him off the bench and playing him primarily second unit guys wasn't working. And I talked about this probably a week ago on the show, where he's a high usage player as a catch and shoot guy. He's not dribbling the ball a lot. He's not creating for others. He's transition and he's catch and shoot and quick trigger, get the ball up on the rim. That's what he does. He's not shooting mid-range jumpers. He's not often driving into the paint. He's not creating shots for teammates necessarily. And that's why he's such a good fit in the starting lineup with this team. And I'm going to keep pounding this drum. And now Finch is starting to play him more with the starters, more in crunch time type situations, but the comfort level isn't there. The synergy is not there between Beasley and the rest of the Timberwolves starting lineup because I believe the crunch time lineup, and by crunch time I mean middle of the fourth when this was a relatively close game. I believe that it was D'Lo, Ant, Towns, Beverly, and Malik Beasley for most of that time. I guess Naz was on the floor at some point. So those two, because Jaden McDaniels is in foul trouble, he only played 14 minutes, 5 fouls, 5 personal fouls in this game for Jaden. So Beasley and Naz were kind of the bench guys that were getting filtered in with the starting lineup. And Naz just looks so much more comfortable right now than Malik Beasley. And so if the Wolves have the ability to dictate things and play big, it's a no-brainer because of how much Malik has struggled. 1 of 6 in this game, 0 of 3 on 3-pointers. And him not being able to knock down an open corner three right now is really detrimental to what the Wolves are trying to do. I mean, if they're going to be a playoff team, he's got to be that sixth man or eventually maybe a starter who can score 14, 15, 16 points a game. We know he can, um, but the confidence isn't there. And maybe it's still the conditioning, the legs maybe still aren't there after his offseason that he had. Um, but they've got to figure something out with Malik Beasley. Right now, he's got next. I mean, like, it's just there's no. I don't have confidence in him when he gets the ball. He certainly doesn't have confidence in himself. I don't know how to break the cycle. My solution all along had been play him with the starting lineup because I just think he's a better fit with that unit. But beyond that, I don't know. And that's going to be something Chris Finch has to figure out moving forward. All right, we'll do individual studs and duds to close out the show today. First, though, let's talk about the title sponsor of today's show, and that, of course, is McDonald's. This episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. Win or lose, it's a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. McDonald's is a road trip staple for my family. If we're traveling in the morning, it's McDonald's breakfast. It's sausage, egg McMuffins all around. If it's late at night and we're traveling, it's McDoubles and fries all around. My kids love, obviously, the Happy Meal cheeseburgers. They're all about it. And I mean, find a 24-hour McDonald's in your neighborhood. That's my go-to at any point, day or night. McDonald's is amazing. Head to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect. Did somebody say Locked On Wolves watch party? Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it. All right, let's talk individual studs and duds from this one. Not too hard to figure this out, actually, in this game. Anthony Edwards obviously gets a stud award. Was fantastic overall. Other than those periods of time where he gets a little bit locked in on, hey, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shoot a step back. I'm going to go isolation. 48 points on 16 to 27. I mean, it doesn't get any more efficient really than that. 7 of 13 on threes, 9 of 12 at the free throw line, which is very good. He was extremely aggressive. He had 5 assists to 6 turnovers, but again, 2 or 3 of those turnovers were effectively garbage time. 2 steals in this game. One led to that awesome alley-oop from D'Lo that got the Wolves to within 4 late in the third quarter. But more of this, please. Obviously, I mean, 48 points on whatever 55, 58% field goal shooting. Obviously, we'll take that every night. But maybe this will help jumpstart him. And again, playing within the flow of the offense is still a challenge for him. And I'm really interested to see how it develops throughout the year if Finch starts to install a little bit more structure into the offense. But then again, he's a guy who's always talked about Finch's about read and react more so than fix play sets like a Ryan Saunders or a Tom Thibodeau or a Flip Saunders. It's more about, read and react. It's the initial action and then play off of that. And Ant is still trying to figure that out. We've talked at times this season about looking like he's understanding, his options, like in a fraction of a second. Okay, I can go to the rim. I could pull up here. I could hang back a second and let my guy roll and then hit the roller. All those things you can almost see him processing it at times, but other times you can tell he's made up his mind. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to the rim. I'm shooting a step back three. And he telegraphs what he's doing. And again, I'm nitpicking now, obviously, about a 20-year-old who just dropped 48 on 27 shots, but here we are. The Timberwolves lost, so obviously we're gonna nitpick a little bit. Karl-Anthony Towns still gets a stud for me in this game. He was relatively quiet, 17 points and 6 of 19 shooting. It's not great, but he's 5 of 10 on threes. He was only 1 of 9 inside the arc. He had 5 offensive rebounds. Really struggled to put those offensive rebounds back for buckets. But 17 and 12, 4 assists, 2 steals, 0 turnovers for Cat. And it was just kind of a weird game for him. The Warriors were mostly doubling on the catch, but Cat missed a couple of turnaround of jump hooks that he typically makes in the low post. It's just a weird matchup for Towns. Kevon Looney's length gave him some trouble. But generally speaking, he had a solid game outside of some of those missed bunnies in the paint. And kept his cool. By the way, he had 0 free throw attempts. He should have had at least 4. And I don't have any problem with him shooting 10 threes. I mean, he made 5 of them. He's shooting like 48% from 3 this year. Obviously he should be shooting threes. And so I'm not going to sit here and say, I can't believe he has no free throw attempts because he's shooting threes. I'm going to say, he missed a couple shots he should have made in the paint, and he got fouled a couple times and it wasn't called. This was actually, in my mind, a fairly decent Karl-Anthony Towns game. Now, you'd like him to do more in a game that they lose on the road, that they were in late against a team that doesn't, I mean, there's no James Wiseman. I mean, Looney's fine. I mean, he had 11 and 17. He's a long player. He's a challenging player to play against. Draymond Green obviously mixed it up until he got hurt too, with somebody that Towns had to deal with. But you'd like him to have a little bit of a better game. He still was one of the three best players on the floor for the Wolves. I don't think there's any two ways about it. My third stud for this one's Naz Reid, 16 and 7 in just 25 minutes off the bench. He did play the 10 minutes at center when Towns was out of the game, but he played 15 minutes next to Karl-Anthony Towns in the game. I think that those minutes were a net negative because they were on the floor together for a lot of that second quarter when the Warriors built that 20-point lead. But again, I think that was more some defensive communication issues that wasn't isolated to those two necessarily either. Offensively, it's still so dangerous. The things you can do with Cat and Naz on the floor together are really endless. Naz had 16 and 5 of 12 shooting, 1 of 3 outside the arc. Good to see him have 9 shot attempts in the paint. 4 of 9 in the paint. You'd like that efficiency to be a little bit better. But 5 of 12 shooting, 1 of 3 on threes, 5 of 6 at the line, 2 assists and a steal, 0 turnovers for Naz, and only 3 fouls committed in 25 minutes. A really solid game. And it really kind of held it down a little bit when Towns was off the floor as well. Duds for this game, again, pretty easy to pick these out. Jaden McDaniels gets one. Jaden just kind of looks lost. I mean, if there's two Timberwolves players who have completely lost themselves and their confidence, it's Malik Beasley and it's Jaden McDaniels. By the way, both of them are the two studs for tonight, or excuse me, two duds for this game. Jaden McDaniels had 2 points on 1 of 5 shooting, missed his only 3-point attempt, and it wasn't close. Only 1 rebound in 14 minutes, 1 steal, committed 5 personal fouls, was a minus 13 in just 14 minutes. Struggled to contain on the perimeter. We've seen him have those issues recently, and just not confident offensively. He blew 2 layups where he made a nice move twice in a row, actually. I think there were consecutive possessions in the third quarter where he just missed a layup. And confident Jaden McDaniels would have thrown it down. I guess he had a nice dunk, that nice and one, I guess, towards the end of the game on in Memphis on Monday. If he had done that, I mean, we're not talking about him as a dud, right? Because he converts those dunks, the Wolves get back into the game faster. But instead, it was almost like watching, and I'm not putting this on him, it was almost like watching Andrew Wiggins, 5 years ago with the Timberwolves, where it's like he's just trying to like finger roll it instead of just throw it down. Take some contact if you have to and make the bucket. But the finesse thing is just, it's not a sure thing, right? The ball can roll off the rim. It's just dunk the basketball. And Jaden McDaniels, just generally speaking, is not look confident and has struggled defensively as well. Malik Beasley, we already talked about him last segment, but 2 points on 1 of 6 shooting, 0 of 3 outside the arc in 22 minutes, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, but he also had 2 turnovers, just not himself. Also notable, I said this earlier, but no Taurean Prince in the rotation for this one. Josh Okogie only played 6 minutes. I think they were all in the second quarter, and the Wolves were he was in the minus 10 in those 6 minutes. Got into Curry a little bit defensively. I'm surprised he didn't play more. Haven't talked about Jared Vanderbilt. He was awesome in this game. 18 minutes, 6 rebounds. He had 5 offensive rebounds in the first quarter alone. 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks in 18 minutes. He did, however, have 3 turnovers because he did the Vando thing where he gets a little too excited and he plays with so much energy, plays too fast sometimes, and got a little bit overzealous. And he also committed 4 fouls in 18 minutes. So doesn't quite deserve one of the 3 stud positions in this game when we had 48 points from Ant and solid games from Cat and Naz. But Vando, tons of energy. I'm always a fan of more Vando. So more Vando, more Naz. That's the hill that I'm going to die on. It looks like this year. Also, at some point, those Jordan McLaughlin minutes. I mean, he only played 5 minutes in this game. I mean, if the offense continues to struggle, they got to start looking at Jalen Noel minutes. And I'm going to start to beat that drum again here pretty soon. That was kind of my crusade last year until he got minutes. And I think we need to see a little bit more Jalen Noel at some point. All right, that's all we have on this one. We'll, of course, still have a show on Friday. We'll preview the Wolves Friday night matchup in LA against the Lakers. The first time we'll see the Lakers this year. Wolves-Lakers, 9:30 Central tip on Friday. And then on Saturday, the Clippers game. So we'll do a Friday show previewing Wolves-Lakers. And I want to hit on some more of the lineup data now that we've got, 10 games, I guess, worth of data. And then we'll do a post-game pod from Friday night's Lakers game, and quite possibly another weekend podcast as well. So plenty to come still this week on Locked On Wolves. If you're not already following or subscribed to the show, you can do that anywhere you listen to podcasts. That, of course, now also includes YouTube, as well as all of the audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, the all-new Odyssey app. And you can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Thanks for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. It's greatly appreciated. If you do listen on Apple, please help us out with a follow, of course, as well as a positive review. It definitely helps us out to get those, to get in front of more folks. And also, if you watch on YouTube, please subscribe, like the video. I really, really do appreciate it. All right, that's all we have for you today. A reminder that Locked On Wolves is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.